It's a new year here in the good old US of A, and in the state of Minnesota, that means new laws. Now, there's a couple times a year you might typically see new legislation take effect. July, August, that's kind of the middle of the year type things, but typically the first of the year. And this year is no exception. Now, while it's true, over 100 different bills or laws were passed in the legislative session, there are a handful that I want to draw your attention to that'll affect probably daily people that live in the state of Minnesota, or could affect a lot of us at some point or another in the near future. One of them has to do with consumers when you go to buy a home or sell your home. Now, Minnesota, we live in a region that has high levels of radon gas, and because of that, the Minnesota legislature passed a law in 2013, which now takes effect in 2014, that has to do with disclosing any information you have when it comes to any radon testing or mitigation that you've done on your home to the seller. It does not mandate a radon test. However, if you ever do one, you do need to disclose that information, and again, anything you did about that to the seller. Radon is actually the #2 causer of lung cancer, behind obviously tobacco smoke and smoking. An environmental law, one that some people might be happy to hear about, is under current law, the State Emergency Response Center for fighting a fire, law enforcement, anything like that that has to do with hazardous material is just reported to the duty officer. Now there's going to be more reporting on it, more follow-up. I don't know if this is going to make things necessarily safer or just add more paperwork, but that's something people have to do. Those that are looking for a job or those that are hiring people. Minnesota's become, I believe it's the 8th or 9th state now in the union to quote-unquote ban the box. Now what the ban the box law is, and it took effect on the 1st of this year, means when you go to fill out an application, you can no longer ask somebody whether or not they are a convicted felon on the application form. A lot of people are familiar with that box that you must check if you've ever been convicted of a felon, and usually if you check that box, there's another box that says explain. You can no longer have that on a job application in the state of Minnesota. However, if you do call that person in for a face-to-face interview, you can still ask the question. Medical assistance has been expanded. 40,000 more people are supposed to go on that, and that's kind of a separate bill from the Affordable Care Act, although it kind of falls into MNsure in the way Minnesota's done that, but it's a little different. A public safety bill that was passed, and this one is going to affect anybody that goes to a scrapyard or owns a scrapyard for any reason when it comes to cars. A new law will now require all scrapyards in the state of Minnesota to have video surveillance and camera surveillance on their premises, and furthermore, require anybody scrapping a car to have their picture then taken of them, the automobile, the driver's license, and the VIN number of that automobile, and that information can then be disclosed to law enforcement if necessary. But I think the most important law, and the one that hasn't gotten as much attention as I think it should have, which took effect in 2014, is this. And this law actually was passed in 2012. Now, I know in 2012, the state bonding bill and the Viking Stadium were the most important things most people remember. But a little-known provision passed in 2012 now takes effect in 2014, and it's this. It requires all those receiving state welfare or state assistance in some way who have been convicted of a felony drug crime to now be subject to random drug testing if they are continuing to take those state benefits. Other states have tried similar laws like this. Florida, Kentucky, Michigan, most notably. Michigan's was thrown out by the United States Supreme Court in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Can't remember exactly which year it was, because it was too broad. Florida and Kentucky are both facing legal challenges because their laws, similar to the Michigan one that was overturned, basically said that anyone receiving government assistance was subject to random drug testing. In Minnesota, it's only those felons convicted of it. The problem is the law doesn't define random, and already county administrators are complaining about that they have no funding for this and they can't possibly do this in human services. It's such a big problem. But here's the thing. I like the law, and here's why. Because if you're taking drugs and public money, I don't need to be paying for your high. You can pay for that yourself.